Hi, brass facts. I just nuked my $600 DSLR lens. Facts here. Today we're going to be talking about budget laser aiming modules. Let me set the stage for something that probably every single person in night vision and also not in night vision has probably experienced. You spend all that money on a nice set of, dual tubes or a monocular like a PVS-14. You might even splurge for a good mount and helmet as well as Comtac 5s for your $20 Baofeng, all to only realize that to effectively aim in the dark, you need some form of IR assist device. And you very quickly realize that most of these are about $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000, and you quickly lose faith in humanity and decide that you're going to just go to bed at night like a good little boy. IR assist devices in general are just full-blown printer ink status. Even if you buy one really good one, it turns out you probably need more than one because these are like optics, each rifle needs their own, and you quickly get fleeced for all the money that you have. So for those that are not okay with selling their offspring for perpetual slave labor to fund this horrible hobby, I'm gonna kind of go over some more budget options today to scratch that itch, if you will, and to give you that capability at night. It's really important to note that this was more so of an experiment and less of a recommendation, so I'll be going over a lot of different options, but I may not actually think that all of those options are any good, and I'll be clear if I don't think so. Before we proceed, we do need some form of criteria. Obviously, it's a list of fangs. When I went into this, my logic was it's got to be under $1,000. Why? Well, if you can spend more than $1,000, it turns out you can actually just buy a really decent laser aiming module known as the Steiner D2. The Steiner D2 has mall performance at about $1,500 or slightly more if it's not on sale. That's really good. Next up, no Chinese imitation bootleg devices. What I mean by this is there are a lot of Chinese devices on the market, I've reviewed many of them, that are trying to kind of take the place of Western devices by literally copying exactly their form factor and then shoving in a crap load of performance because they don't need to adhere to American FDA laws. These devices are great performance for the price, however they are incredibly janky. At this time, I'm not actually sure if there is a complete package, something that checks all of the boxes, reliability, performance, and not having a jank QD mount. In my opinion, these are just a non-starter for first-time buyers or even dudes that want a second laser aiming module but are really on a budget. To me, gambling with money like this does not make sense. You want to buy something that you know is going to hold up. Finally, this night vision assist device, as I'm calling it because not all of them are laser aiming modules per se, has to have illumination. Why? Well, you need illumination to aim in about 50% of conditions at night. All right, so that's our criteria. We got a price tag of under $1,000. It can't be a Chinese imitation, bootleg device, and it's got to have some form of illumination of some sort. To really start this video off on the worst foot imaginable, 2 of the 3 most interesting devices on this list are no longer made. The CTF2, for example, is a really intriguing way to mount a flashlight, laser aiming module, and illuminator in a Build-A-Bear fashion for not so much money. It's discontinued, and Phantom Hill has closed shop, so we're probably not even going to see a CTF3 anytime soon. Hi, yeah, right as I was about to send it on this video, the CTF2 design got purchased, so there might actually be hope for this thing in the future, but we'll see at what price point and design and you name it. So still TBD, you still can't get it, but hey, there's still hope. Next up for the second, we almost got a cool product, but I guess we didn't. The Vulcan head from US Night Vision, which would screw into any Surefire pattern body and provide illumination and laser aiming capability, which was also zeroable at a fraction of a cost of some even regular flashlights. Now there's certainly some questions about if a flashlight threads had any hope of holding zero, but it don't matter, they discontinued the product like instantly. Very weird, especially since you can still see the Vulcan head as the backdrop on the 3EIR website. Alright, we're 5 minutes deep, 1 ad read later. Let's actually start with a product you can buy right now. The Streamlight VIR 2. My god, we'll make it through it, I promise. It's a white light, laser, and illuminator, making it technically a fully fledged laser aiming module. And at the price of $330, while higher than you'd probably imagine, makes it somewhat affordable to get all the capability onto a rifle, or more than likely a PDW or handgun, without breaking the bank. This concept of taking a pistol light and putting on a rifle is actually not at all uncommon, and for a while there, people were putting X300Us on rifles as the go-to meta back when it had basically the same performance as the premier light at the time, the M600. Unfortunately though, that's where the upsides end. I talked about this a lot in the GL4 Pro video, but the battery needs to be removed via the rear end piece, which often means dismounting the entire unit in the context of a pistol or a PDW. This has disastrous consequences for your Zero. Probably fine for a handgun, but for a PDW, 100-yard shots under night vision are not at all out of the question. Well, rather, it would not be at all out of the question if the VIR2 even had a hope of pushing any illumination past 50 yards, which it cannot. It's about the most floody illumination device on the market. Despite all that, the tri-functionality certainly is nice when balling on a budget or just trying to get both night vision and visibility function on a very small form factor device like a Flux Raider. The constant zero loss, while annoying, can sort of just be mitigated because outside of Troll Tarkov builds, basically every PDW setup is going to run a red dot, so you can kind of just look through the red dot, and then every time you put a new battery in and retighten it, you can just co-align the lasers again at like 50 to 75 yards, and that's going to get you basically as far as your platform is able to get you. So the loss of zero here is just more of a time sink annoyance than anything that is ultimately all that debilitating. Really, the biggest issue is the fact that this just has a debilitating amount of splash, but we can sort of mitigate that by opening your wallet and buying either a Code 4 rifle defense kit or a dark EFL, I think it's called, both of which clip on the front end of a VIR. No up-close B-roll of the Code 4 one because it vanished into the ether after one night of testing. Or, I don't know, someone probably just stepped on it. But of the two, the dark EFL seems to be more effective, though not by nearly as much as you think given the price. It has a lens meant to focus the IR illuminator component and extend the range, but in practice, all it's really doing is restricting the flood. I did not see an increase in intensity on the hotspot, and thus no real increase in range despite it being advertised as doing such. Most of the benefit actually just comes from the narrower cone. This allows you to pie around cover without flashbanging yourself with the massive flood. Thus, the Code 4 defense kit sort of does the same thing for a fraction of the cost, though it's not quite as efficient at. I'd say grab one of these kits if you already own a VIR2. Otherwise, a Holosun LS321 is probably just a better device. The X400V is basically the exact same product as the VIR2 with a noticeably more usable beam pattern for double the price. What's up? Welcome to Surefire. Thank you, sir. May I have another? Coupled with the exact same battery loading issue and probably the worst ergonomic package I've ever seen on a device like this in my life, it's not good, bros. Front bezel turns the device from white light to IR mode. Cool. Awesome. Unfortunately, the rear device is independently controlling the laser aiming module. That's a problem because that's roughly where your hand goes most of the time, and with the bulbous section that actually holds the laser, the amount of times you mistakenly turn off the laser, switch it to a different mode, this device is a huge pain in the ass. Then, for some reason, the laser component on the rear has the ability to override the front component, so you can get viz with a white light with a viz, but the IR component on the front doesn't turn off the laser in the rear, but the laser in the rear can actually turn off the thing. As such, I generally don't recommend the X400V unless you got a smoking deal on it. It really is not as good as you think it is. Thus far, for rifle use at least, or at least setups that can passively aim with a red dot, most people are just realizing that they can just move away from the requirement of an IR laser and just seeking out an IR illuminator exclusively. So basically, you aim with the red dot and you use the IR illuminator to get you some more distance with passive aiming, because as you know, passive aiming actually has a very short window in darker conditions. Doing this is, without question, the worst of both passive aiming and active aiming. But hey, we're balling on a budget, and this is actually a very consistent way to shoot stuff at night with a very small form factor. And because you're relying on a red dot on your rifle, you're actually basically guaranteed to have a good solid zero at all times, which is not a guarantee with cheaper laser aiming modules. All of these come in the form of flashlights at this time, as you'd expect. The M600V, the 300V, the Olight Odin IR, the Inforce IR WML, several others fit this bill. I'll say it right out of the gate and skip you guys some trouble. I've tried every single one of these, some of which I've owned for like a decade. The M600V and the 300V are by far the best option here, despite carrying the brutal Surefire tax. The Olight Odin IR is a decent contender if you're willing to, bypass the fact that it's an Olight. But even then, Olight is obsessed with proprietary batteries and being a DD. Well, all of them, for some reason, rock this quick detach mount, which is incredibly susceptible to getting gummed up with dirt and sand and jamming up, and very fragile on blunt impacts.
Ryan, your course of fire sucks!
He's just sad now.
Ryan doesn't have feelings.
Yes, he does.
He's a clone.
You're just an insensitive asshole. You dropped something.
You dropped it. You're actually ruining his life right now.
The 600 and 300V turn into regular lights when you twist the bezel and have a slightly tighter beam pattern than the old M600 Scout series in white light mode, which is hilarious because it makes the IR white light flashlight from Surefire better than the dedicated M600 Scout white light. What the fuck, Surefire? Anyway, this makes them a great setup for primary day setups that only consider night vision as a niche last resort. So basically most PDWs, SPRs, or even some, lightweight home defense setups. I used to not be a huge fan of these, but then I ran the piss out of them leading up to and at the Moons Out, Goons Out, Forgotten Weapons night vision competition. And I found that with the right optics height and setup, I'm still not a fan of them, but they absolutely do work. I'd argue that these are still very limited, suffering from many of the same issues the VIR2 did, where the IR illuminator has so much flood and limited range that 50% of the time you're just going to opt not to use it. But the fundamental concept does somewhat work, which leads me down another expensive rabbit hole. The Blazer LED illuminator. There has been a recent influx, and by influx I mean 2 designs, that really take this red dot plus illuminator combo to its zenith. The first of which was the B.E. Myers Kiji. The performance of the Kiji is nuts. It's basically a focus setting on a mall, a $3,500 MFAL, in a very small flashlight form factor. At first glance, I think many had the same idea I had here. Kiji, red dot, boom, you're good to go, bootleg mall for a fraction of the cost. Unfortunately, it's a very large fraction. But then, Zbolt released their IR head. It's huge, it's ugly, but goddamn, does it kind of actually work, and it comes in at a really good price. The standalone price is about $288 and then throw in a tape switch, which is already way less than our Kiji. But the full combo is $388, so for $100 more, you're getting a second body, tail cap, white light head, and a pretty nifty mount to bundle it all together. Now, this isn't technically a cheap Kiji, it's an LED emitter, not a V-cell emitter, though they are coming out with a V-cell version soonish, maybe, I don't know. So like with the D2, you're going to see a very faint red glow that you can observe out to about 15 yards with the naked eye, sort of like you've seen on those IR security cameras. But it does come with a focusing ring on the front to allow you to adjust the splash to a narrower beam for those longer range engagements. But it also allows you to cut down on splash in a CQB environment, say if you're panning around a piece of cover or trying to keyhole shoot. Very good, actually. I've run it only for 2 range trips, admittedly, but thus far, I'm impressed. So much so that I'm going to consider revising my statement of the Holosun LS321 as the go-to budget laser aiming module. Speaking of the LS321, it's still kind of the king of budget laser aiming modules. Sort of. Like I said, I kind of prefer the Blazer combo if you already have a red dot on the gun, so you're only really paying for the illumination, because it gets you out further and honestly does so more effectively with higher resolution due to the amount of IR you're pushing down range. However, if you don't have a red dot on your gun or you want a traditional laser aiming module with an actual laser on it, well, the LS321 is still honestly the king of performance. It has a really weak, anemic illuminator, but compared to the other options we've shown thus far, it's much more focused and actually gets out a lot further than those flashlight-based illuminators. Unfortunately, street price seems to kind of be climbing up there, and it's found for about $700 to $800, while it used to be found for about $600. However, I would recommend just going out and checking out sales on, say, like Primary Arms or something, or waiting for a cheap one to show up on TaxSwap. Remember, this thing is made by an actual real company, so if it shits the bed or whatever, you can just warranty the thing, no questions asked. But yeah, that's it. Just a quickie on my suffering to try to find the best way to aim under night vision on a budget. Really, the answer here is to sacrifice a chicken, or a small child to the gods of Holosun and get them to release the iris already. Please, please release it. I will commit felonies if you fail to release this on time and on budget. If you want a little bit more brass facts, you can go over to Subscribestar. It's basically Patreon, but not Patreon, where you can go give me money every month and I give you some content. You get the early access for basically every single video, and you get to watch this podcast I do with Hop, which, you know, sometimes makes sense, sometimes doesn't make sense, as well as the live stream archives over the years. So yeah, go ahead, check that out. Awesome, sick. See you in the next one.
Content time.
Hey, nice poo you just did there.
That's a peep. Hey Nova, do you want to be annoying? Go on his tent.
Does she
Lie
ever?
down. Go on his tent. All right, go on. Lie down. Lie down.
So uncalled for, dog.
No, get in the way. Go on. Get in the way. I guess when you're not Ryan, she doesn't really...
The thing you're forgetting is that Nova and I are on the same team.
Nova's on everyone's team.
We're allied against you.
You know, I used to have this tent, and it was such a nice tent.
Everybody's got this tent now.
You know what happened to mine?
Probably just lit it on fire or something.
No, the pole snapped in half.
Well, I think they're like $8.
Yeah.